joining us. My name is Tim Cole. I want to welcome you to our webinar. Our webinar series is called The Waypoint 55, and we produce a monthly webinar on ministry-related topics in 55 minutes or less. And so this month's topic is one of the recurring themes that we have once or twice every year for church security. And it's a relatively new topic for church leadership. Some of the topics we talk about have been things that we've talked about for decades or centuries, even since the beginning of the church. But church security and safety is a new point of emphasis that churches have really ramped up in the last decade or so. And a lot of standards have been set for what is good for a healthy church. And so we're going to be talking about this thanks to Mid-Atlantic Christian University, our ministry partner here in the region that has been a sponsor of our webinar platform since we began 4 years ago. And so I would have to go back and check. So that's March, April, May. This may be our 50th edition of our webinar this evening. And we have a YouTube channel, the Waypoint 55 YouTube channel, that has the playlists for all the different kinds of webinars that we've produced over the last 5 years. And so if you were to search for that, we have some for elders, worship teams, prayer teams, children, safety and security, missions leaders, different lay-led teams in your church, and there's playlists just for those. And so so you can subscribe to our channel over here. You can see that, hit the little bell right next to it, and you'll be notified every time one of the new videos gets posted to our channel, and you can forward those to the leaders at your church that happen to serve in that particular area, that it might help them be better equipped to lead in your church. So that we would hope that you would do that. The one thing that's new for us at webinar, not only podcasts for the last 4 years, but in January of this year, we started the Waypoint podcast, not the webinars, but the podcasts. And so we now have, those are every other week. They drop with leaders in our region, telling their stories of leading their church. And we've had a great group so far, and hundreds of people. I think we're up just nearly 1,000 downloads in about 4 months of those podcasts. And so we'd love for you to look for that on our website as well. If you go to the Waypoint website and hit podcast, you're able to subscribe to whichever podcast platform that you use. But this evening, we're going to talk about children's security, keeping the kids safe in your church. Your facility has lots of areas that you need to keep safe, but we're going to talk about kids specifically tonight. And maybe you heard the story from just a couple of weeks ago, where there was a little boy who was abducted from a church in Virginia. It was in Giles County. I didn't know where Giles County was exactly, so I had to look it up. It's down there between Blacksburg and West Virginia, down there in that area. And so we had already had this webinar planned with my friend Don Keehner, who's joining us tonight. And Don is working in the area of church security and safety. It's the organization that he works with is called Safe Ministry, and I thought he was the perfect person to ask to kind of help teach us some of the standards for keeping our kids safe. And then just 2 weeks ago, was it just like 8 days ago, Don? I'm trying to remember when it was. It was on a weekend on a Sunday. So I want to introduce Don Keehner to you. We go way back. He and my wife are from the same church, and his wife, Don's wife, and mine were friends in youth group together a few years ago. Those of you in the Waypoint region would appreciate Don has the same barber as Dave Heilman and Paul Vyers on our staff, and so he fits right in. Don served here in Virginia at the Northside Christian Church years ago as a youth minister before going back to Indiana and serving as a lead minister for 7 years, and then as an associate minister doing small groups and discipleship at a very large church in Indianapolis, and very recently has transitioned to working in this organization called Safe Ministry. And so he has a lot to teach us about the standards for keeping our kids safe. So welcome, Don.
Thanks for having me, Tim. I'm looking forward to just talking with you all and trying to help. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, well, I want to tell our panelists again, or not our panelists, but those who are listening tonight, that there's a Q&A button at the bottom of their screen. And if along the way they have a question to ask, they can hit that Q&A button and type their question in right when they think of it. I have a queue over on the side of my screen for all the questions that might be typed in. And as we go through the evening, I can try and moderate those questions and ask them at the time that would fit in or at the end. And if there are questions that don't get answered tonight, I get a report of all the questions that are typed into the Q&A box. And so we can answer those after the fact via email. So please don't hesitate to ask questions, not in the chat button, but in the Q&A button. And then we get a report to make sure that we answer those questions. There will be an automated email that goes out automatically tomorrow evening, 24 hours after the fact, that's generated by our webinar platform. And in that, any of the resources that are talked about, including Don's chart that he's going to show here to teach us a little bit, train us a little bit about this, will be there so that you've got resources where you can connect with him and ask him questions and how he or others like him could serve you in your church. And so I just want to let you know that. So you may be wanting to take notes tonight, but some of it will be available after the fact in the email tomorrow. So Don, I'm curious, your thoughts. I want to dive right in because we always run out of time with good conversations like this, but just your thoughts when you heard about this case or this incident in Giles County here in Virginia about the little boy. And you probably know way more details than most people know, whether they have never heard of it or just saw the headlines about it. But I'm curious if you want to paint a profile for what happened there to kind of set up the case. I think most of the people understand on our webinar tonight that child safety in our church facilities is important, but that really tees up the conversation for what happened there.
Oh, yeah, it does. It does. I thought it's very relevant. Thankfully, the 2-year-old boy was found quickly. The FBI got involved and found him within 24 hours, which is not always the case, but very, very thankful there. Now, the reason Tim and I were talking earlier today just about this case was that an abductor and a predator. So I'm going to talk about someone that wants to do harm to children in an organization that you may be serving in or leading in. Okay, so it's a little different. There's a lot of different variables of security and safety. One is physical safety and locking things down and secure. That goes into this. However, I'm going to talk about 18 and under with the thought of how do we keep a 6-year-old safe physically and in a room where they learn about Jesus and where they have a great experience. But then also, how do we keep them safe from somebody that wants to do harm to them? And so this case in Virginia, in Giles, Virginia, a 2-year-old boy was abducted. So my wife and I, we've got older kids, and she's like, man, how did that 2-year-old go with her? And I was like, Kelly, do you remember our oldest? He didn't start talking until he was like 3.5. He understood everything we said, but he wasn't going to say, that's not my grandma, or I don't know that person. But what we found out was about a 45-year-old lady went into a church and abducted during the service, abducted a 2-year-old boy, no relation. What I found out doing some research is she cased the place. So she cased that church and 3 other churches that morning. Okay. However, the month before she did the same thing. So they went to the same 3 churches a month before. Now they're here at the day they're going to abduct a 2-year-old or a boy that she wanted. And they picked, this is key. I believe, and we'll find out more information, they picked the church that was the least defense, like the easiest grab, to be honest. Mm-hmm. And so that's the same as an abductor does that, looks and goes, okay, where's the easiest place for us to grab a child? And a predator works a little differently, but they're looking for the same thing. They're looking for easy access. And so the thought is this: you've got to have a defense from an abductor to a predator that is stronger than your neighbor down the street. Did you get that right? So it doesn't have to, I'm going to give you a lot of things to work on, and you may be missing 5 or 6, but you got to be stronger than the ones that are near you. What we know about this couple is they drove 70 miles to this area. Okay. They drove 70 miles and then they went 8 minutes apart. So those churches were about 8 to 10 minutes apart. So maybe a couple miles. And so they literally went to the easiest access. And so, and they grabbed the 2-year-old boy. Luckily, it looks like this church did have a camera system, or there was some camera system in that community that caught the car, because they caught him 70 miles away about 24 hours later. But you want to talk about like a growth stopper, a way to prevent your church from growing. You, I mean, I can't imagine. I can't imagine this church and the ripple effects it's going to have in that community, as people kind of look and look at them. So just, so when I say that, they're looking for a predator, and an abductor is looking for easy access.
Yeah.
So you got to make your defense strong.
Well, I get to visit a different church practically every Sunday, probably 40 plus per year, and it's always surprising to me. First of all, I'm married to a children's minister of 30 years, so I see the children's ministry area through those lenses vicariously. But I'm always surprised at the range of the policies in play for taking care of kids. And I'm old enough that and my dad was military, so we moved around, visited a lot. We usually visit 2 or 3 churches, when we got to a new community. And, decades ago, I won't tell me decades it was, but, it was very common that it wasn't a full children's service, but the kids would be in the worship, and then they'd say, "Okay, kids, you all go downstairs," and all the kids would just get up and go downstairs. And even as a visitor, I was just supposed to run downstairs to an area my parents had never been to, and I guess that was okay 40, 50 years ago, but times have changed and standards have changed and parents' expectations have changed, and so, but I still see the range. I was in a church within the last few weeks where that was still that was the deal, is kids sang with the parents, and then they said, "Okay, kids, go on," and everybody just left out the back, and the parents had really no idea where they're going. I was really surprised that in 2021 some churches are still doing that, and I would guess that a lot of churches will think, "Well, it's never going to happen to us," but that's exactly the church that had this happen in Giles County. Was
Yeah, they did. They did, Tim. Because I watched an article or an interview of a guy that attends there, and he was very sad that this happened. But he's like, "Hey, we know everybody." I'm like, "Well, no, you don't." They didn't have. You can tell they didn't have a very secure check-in and check-out system that
Mhm.
had some checks and balances. They did not have just a volunteer safety security person when the service was in play, because I think they would have noticed somebody coming up to them, walking the children's area, a lady going, "Can I help you? Who are you looking for?" Things that they could have kind of brought some awareness or red flags that, hey, I don't think this person's allowed in the children's. A lot of churches that we talk to say, if you can lock down your children's area, lock it down to where somebody's got to you got to open a door for them to get in when the services are in play.
Mhm. Well, let's dive into just kind of what you are teaching churches. I know that you get to train churches of various sizes what they need to do to keep their kids safe, and I'm guessing that for most of the people that are on the call tonight or will be joining us via our YouTube channel later, some of the things they have in play. But I'm hoping that by your sharing tonight, that they can take what they're doing to a whole nother level. And they may not be able to do what every church in the world does, but like you said, the minimum standard is you've got to be doing better than the other churches in your town so that you're least susceptible to someone doing something that they shouldn't. So for the churches that are on tonight that have very little in play, I'm curious, what are some of the basic things that you would say? Here's what you've got to have going at your church to make sure your facility is safe for your kids.
Yeah, so I try to get them to do the why, understand the why that you want to protect kids, and then also, why is that? Like, what are the ripple effects of what could happen if something happens under my watch that I am leading? Okay, and so yeah, there's some very very basic things they can put into play to help somebody that wants to come in to your organization and groom you or groom a child. Okay, and groom a child. And so there's two things at play: grooming you, building trust. And grooming's kind of a new thing over the last 15, 20 years. It was not around 30 years ago, okay, even though abuse was, but grooming an organization to where you build trust, and then trying to get access to a child. Okay, so here's a couple of things right off the top that I would say. Background checks are good. and I sell them. Okay. But you got to have more in play than just a background check. Okay.
Hmm.
They do give a good sense of a defense to say, oh yeah, if you're going to come serve here, that's fine. We have our processes. We need to get a background check on you. And then we've got a couple other more steps you've got to take. And sometimes what we have found, and in the sense of interviews and talks that we've had, that sometimes that may be enough to go, ooh, I'll get back to you on that, right? And so sometimes your best loss could be somebody saying, oh, I'm not going to serve here, okay,
Hmm.
because their motives are wrong. And so I would say definitely a background check. And then policies and procedures. We don't mandate or write policies or procedures, okay? We do help people and help churches understand you need to have them and you need to enforce them. Like everybody plays at the same level. You can't just have people not following policies or procedure, whether they're the executive pastor, youth minister, all the way down. Hey, we have these 4 or 5 policies. And when I say it like that, I say, kind of get your policies and then which one are your top 5 and are they being followed and are you even assessing them during the year? Okay. Any church can do those 2 things, a background check policy and just policies and procedures, and then naming what are our 3 or 4 or 5 that we want to enforce, whether it's the 2 adult rule, and married couples don't count as 2 adults if there's not another adult in the room. If there's just a married couple, they count as 1 adult, and you've got to get somebody in that's over 18. Okay. Now again, there's some tension there, right? Again, I was pastor for 30 years, and I understand the tension of volunteers and the tension of ratios. It is difficult. However, you've got to start to raise the bar on policies. And then here's just an easy one before we dive into some things is look at your organization that you're serving in, and is there possibility for a child to be isolated with an adult or older youth that's not their dad or mom or brother? Okay. So what I'm saying is from that 8 to 12, when church is in play and y'all are doing your Sunday morning, is there a chance that do you have policies that aren't being followed where kids are vulnerable and an adult could actually hurt or isolate a kid to start building trust with them? So I mean, those are 3 things that you can start doing or at least thinking about, because they all play when you start to put them in process of, hey, here's 6 or 7 things we can do to keep kids safe. And what we've seen and what happens is a perpetrator will start to um, get in and go, whoa, 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 they've got too much at play. I'm going to the Little League, or I'm going to go to the other church, or I'm going to go to the Y. And I would hate for any kid to get hurt, but I can't be responsible for them. I can only be responsible with the leadership that I've been given and
Hmm.
where I'm serving. Okay.
Yeah.
And then, yeah. So you got a question, Tim?
Yeah, that's great. Well, someone asked about background checks, so I'm just curious for those churches that have not yet made a policy that they would do background checks for all their children's and youth workers. Uh, Tell us how easy that is, what it costs typically, the range of what it costs, and what those do and what they don't do.
Yeah, yeah. So, and again, this is not a sales. There are some very good companies out there that sell a good check. You
Mhm.
should be able, different states have some different things in play. I saw somebody from North Carolina. Okay.
Mhm.
So North Carolina, actually, there's a few states, North Carolina, Texas, Pennsylvania are 3 states that actually report to certain databases very well. So you could actually get a cheaper check in North Carolina for like $9 that's not at a county level, and be okay. Now it's not great, but it's good. Okay. And then in Virginia, West Virginia, I saw somebody from Indiana. We really teach on multi-layered basis. So if you're talking to a company that's going to do background checks, ask them how many databases do you go in. We train on Social Security verification, alias, national crim, national sex offender, and we want to get to the county of where your people are living. Okay. And I call it the garden in your backyard. The national crim is a huge 500-acre field with millions and millions of criminal data that companies can search, and they can do it well. But to get really good understanding of people, you got to get to the county in most states. North Carolina, you can get by without getting to the county just because their counties report to their state and their state reports to a good amount of databases. Okay. A
I
lot
was
of states
sympath-
don't.
Yeah, that was
And
something
so
new to me to make sure you told me several weeks ago for the church where I attend to make sure that the county records are included in your background check, even if it costs an extra. It's another tier up as far as cost goes. It's worth it.
yeah.
And so that was key. Uh, how long does a background check? How long is it valid when someone like if you've got
I
a
think most
youth
insurance
sponsor?
companies, yeah, most insurance companies, it's invalid right when you get it back, right? Because it's going backwards, right? We do have some logic that a lot of churches are jumping on to where we can do arrest record that we can put on your staff. If they get arrested in any part of the country, you'll be notified in 24 hours. So we have a lot of companies and churches that want that because they have drivers, right? They have fleets of trucks, staff. We have churches that are over 100, 200 in staff, and they want to know to get ahead of it. Okay, so that before it gets out into any press. But I would say three years for a recheck for your volunteers. That's kind of standard with insurance companies.
Mhm.
A price of a check. If you're paying $20 and not getting county, then you need to look somewhere else. If you're paying $8 and and you're just getting no county, you probably need to look somewhere else outside of those 3 states that I mentioned. All the other states probably need a county for the most part. And you should be somewhere in that um, 13 to $17 for a county check. And sometimes there's some variables that may shoot up to 20 due to the state you're in. There are some states, New York is very tough to do a check-in because they have so many county court costs that are make it very, so it's not all apples to apples, but I would say not all checks are the same. Get a good company that will teach you what's in their check.
Yeah.
So
We had someone chime in about are there some sample policies, and I'll make a note of this. It may not be in our email tomorrow. I think I can pull it off though. Uh, that we will include a link to some sample uh, policies for safety and security, particularly for kids, from one of our good churches here in Virginia. For our new churches, our church plants, that partnering churches, many of you are on the webinar tonight. They're from a partnering church of Waypoint. Our new churches start from day one with a really solid policy manual for their church, including kid safety. And so we'll try and get that. And if it's not included in the automated email tomorrow, I'll make sure that it gets emailed to everyone who is joining us tonight. We get a report of all the emails of who joined us tonight, and I'll make sure we email you one within the next few days of what a good policy statement looks like.
I would say this too, Tim. One thing to don't feel bad about asking people's policies, other churches. I know I was at Traders in Indy, a good sized church here, and we gave our policies and procedures away for free. So if
Mhm.
you want to, a lot of churches, they say, hey, you don't have to reinvent it. They have some good that you can kind of go, I feel really good about this policy that I want to put in place. And you can grab them. There's a couple churches in California that have got some really solid ways of being able to distribute that adults remember, right? Because if you have policies and you sometimes you can have way too many policies and nobody knows which one's right. As opposed to having a little and everybody's following them. And so there's that tension there. But I would ask some of the churches that just ask if they got a full-time children's pastor or a few of them, just ask for help. They'll
Yeah,
send it.
yeah, I've seen that as well. That people are very open-handed.
Then
For
then
that.
you can make it your own.
Well, I've seen a lot of churches that their background check is pretty much the end the end of their plan, and so I'm curious. After background checks, then where do you go? You've said background checks, then having a good set of policies in play as
Yeah.
well. But then what else do you train churches
Can you go ahead
to
and
go to the
share that?
next
Can you
level?
share that screen? Can you share
Yep,
that screen?
yep.
So as I'm talking to you all, we shared Giles, a smaller church. It looked like it was about under 200 where there was an abduction. 2018, I've been following this church in North Carolina. That's mega church, 6, 7 campuses. And they had many kids, 8 kids, 4-year-old boys that were abused. Okay. What we know about the abuse is that perpetrator, he got charged, he found guilty, he's never getting out. Okay. But what we do know is this, is that um, he was at two other churches 2 hours away, 2 to 3 hours away. I think he ended up South Carolina, North Carolina, all in the same vicinity that I think some of you people live.
Hmm.
Um, and it does not look like they got in contact with those other churches. And so this is where what you're looking at, I'm going to go counterclockwise. What we teach from is that, yes, you got to start with a background check and a
Hmm.
multi-layered one. Okay. And, 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 and then we would say, do you have any type of check-in and check-out system? We have a management system that does a high-tech stuff. It's in a lot of the 80% of the schools in Indiana. It's in, just opened up the school system in Tampa, Florida, the seventh largest. This can do crisis. It can call police. It's pretty extensive, more than what a church would need. However, you need some check-in and check-out system, right? That you've got to have for your children and your students coming in. Students are a little different with your youth group. However, you probably need somebody there, security-wise, an adult that is on your safety team if you're there Wednesday nights. Okay, I'll just say that that could be your management system a little bit, that nobody runs off.
Yeah.
But I would say this for your children's on Sunday morning. Giles is one case. They did not have. It doesn't look like they had a very good check-in and check-out system, because that's how they got taken.
Yeah, and
And so
I'll interject there that a lot of churches are afraid of the cost of some kind of, you know, technologically advanced system, uh, and and those are great and they work, but it doesn't have to be that. It can be, there are some basically sticker based ones, uh, where the long one, you write the kid's name on it, it's got a number on it, and you put it on the back of their shirt, and then the small one the parent gets, and when they come to pick up the kid at the end of the service, my sticker has to match their sticker, and it's pretty cheap, but it's making sure that the kids are going to the right people. But I remember, yeah, go ahead.
no, no, I was just saying, and it's being, I mean, parents are, they're watching. I mean, they're used to this, and yeah, maybe a little inconvenience, but it's needed. And I think they leave going, wow, they really care about my kid, right? And you can get label printers, you can do some stuff. It doesn't have to be, like Tim said, huge high tech, but there's got to be something that causes them to slow down when they're getting your child, to make sure you're verifying the right numbers, that Joey, who can't talk when he's 3 or 2, goes to the right person, right? And I would even say this, in that you probably need excluded parties. Like, you need to have some way of being able to go, how does an ex get a child out of a children's, if he's, can he get one if he's not allowed, right?
Mhm.
Um, and so, because the kid's going to go to dad, if there's any restraining order or anything like that. And I've seen that multiple times at churches that I've served. Okay, where so there's some safety there that definitely need check-in. I would say this: the next thing with background check and a safety is references. Okay, and getting past their two best friends. Um, and you can do this. However, you've got to have somebody that's administrative, and you've got to take the application that you're giving them and the references and see them as separate. They're not the same thing. So you're doing an application. Hey, I want to be work in the children's area. Okay, fill this application out. Great. Now we know who you are. We got your digits. We got your numbers. We know kind of a little bit about you. We're going to do a background check. And oh, by the way, we need some references. And we would say you got to get past their two best friends. You need to get to an organization that they've served at, okay, that they volunteered. If they haven't, then you need to get to a professional, somebody that's been over them, like a supervisor, manager. Hey, could we have somebody that where you work and vouch for it? We would even say a family member, okay? Um, and then as you do your reference, what type questions are you asking? And you need to be pointed in these questions, but also we put in our templates and we put on references like, does this person obey the rules? Okay, because you're gonna have policies that you want them to obey. Do they willingly obey the rules, or do they push the envelope, right? Because what happens, they may not be a perpetrator, okay, but if they push the rules and then somebody that does want to do harm come in, it makes people vulnerable because they've been pushing. Now this person's going to push the rule. Because the reality is this: a perpetrator is very hard to catch, very difficult to catch. but where you catch them is breaking policy, breaking procedures, okay? And that's noticeable in their references. It's noticeable how you ask the questions. And then I would be pointed and go, do you have any hesitation for this person working with children, 10 and under type deal? Just ask it, right? And you get those 4 or 5 references. Now, the reason I say I think this is the hardest thing for children's pastors, people in leadership there, is because of the tension of needing workers, and the tension of wow, that's administrative. Like that takes a lot of calling, right? That takes a lot of follow-up. And then the next step we would say is you've got to have an interview with these people once you've got the background check, once you've got the references, and I would even say this, once you've done training. Okay, are you doing any training on grooming along with the references, and any type of that you've got them going through, to where they are understanding what grooming is, what the red flags are that a perpetrator is looking to push and break rules. And when you see somebody breaking rules, it could just be an omission. Like, hey, Tim, you realize you shouldn't be with Joey in the hallway by himself. Nobody's here. You were taking him to get some resources. He probably needs to stay in the classroom, right? And Tim goes, oh yeah, man, I just forgot, right? He was crying, I was holding him, and I just took him with me. Like, no. And Tim puts him back and he apologizes, and Tim's good, right? But a perpetrator will build trust with you, and then get to a point where he breaks a policy and you say, oh no, it's okay, that's Tim. He's good, right? And that's a dangerous spot, because he just broke a policy and you okayed it, or the people in there thought it was a little odd, but they didn't have enough training to go, hey, should I tell somebody? Because that's usually after the fact, we find out that, wow, yeah, I noticed, I saw it, but I didn't know if I was supposed to say anything. And saying something is huge, being able to go, hey, because it keeps everybody in the same lane. And so we would say references and then an interview. A lot of larger churches are not very good at this. They do very large group interviews, Tim, where they will bring in 15 people and kind of show them the policies, maybe show them a 10-minute training, and then say, okay, you're good to go, right?
Yeah.
But what they haven't seen is kind of the bent. And what we've seen we've got law enforcement on our board, Secret Service. We've got one podcast where a detective in Boston area just said perpetrators are so bent on getting what they want, they can't see the obvious, but they're smart, okay? And what I mean by that is once you get an interview, what we have found is that, and they sometimes will create a red flag because they want a specific age. Hey, I just like to work with 5-year-olds. Okay, but we don't have needs in 5-year-olds. Would you work with 10-year-olds? You don't have to be the main teacher. You can be an assistant. No, I want to work with 5. I only work with 5. Like, that would be a huge red flag of going, whoa, hold on, right? Maybe we need to. So how you ask those questions in an interview, we try to help churches understand, man, it's critical on getting to know them, right? Yeah. I'm flying through this because you've got 2 pastors that are supposed to be time conscious, right?
Yeah, that's right. Well, I would say for those who are listening, um, you're thinking that's a lot of administration, like Don said. And if you're not administratively wired, you're thinking, oh man, we need to do that, but that's going to be a pain in the patootie. But I can tell you, there are people in your church that if you say, we need this done and it keeps our kids safe, that they'll do it all day long. You just have to find them. And there are people that they're not going to volunteer anywhere else, but if you give them this job, they are all in. And so my wife, who's been a children's minister for many years, would find those people, and she is more creatively wired, but she found her administrative buddies that took care of her, including all of these things. And so don't not do the things that are important to do just because of all the administrative work that's there. Find the people in your church who are there already that want to help you do it.
Yeah, I agree, Tim. You've got to, because you may have some people serving in your children's area that never work with children but keep children safe. Okay, so I would even say, if you don't like doing interviews because whatever you are on the Enneagram, you're just too nice, that maybe you need somebody that is more of a lion in the personality, maybe somebody from HR that has an HR background and says, man, I love doing interviews. They're great,
Hmm.
right? And you work with them to go, hey, I need a I need a way of asking these questions to find out who we're getting in. And they don't have to be long interviews, but we're talking 20, 30 minutes where they know the policies, they're willing to follow them. You get a little bit more of a feel of who they are, and possibly due to the questions that you ask in that interview, any type red flag. We
Yeah.
have one of our trainers that's out in Portland, and she's like, if a church has done maybe 70 interviews and they haven't turned one or two people away to say, I think this guy needs to work out in the parking lot, then then they may not be asking the right questions or doing the right references.
Yeah. Don, I'm curious, for those grooming scenarios, how long would you recommend that you know somebody that outlasts the groomer, if that makes any sense? That is it is there kind of a standard, or at least a recommendation of a year or 2 years that they've been at your church just to outlast the groomer who's not going to wait that long?
Yeah, so that's a long time. That is. So like if somebody was coming in to serve, where do you feel comfortable um, entering in them to serve? How quickly, right? I think that's what you're asking.
Yes,
Possibly. I mean, one
that's
thing,
yeah.
do you know they could have been in your church for a year, so you know them. They haven't been real pushy, and now they're getting into, hey, we're being challenged to serve, and would like to serve in the children's area. That's fine. We would definitely have some type of waiting, and that person, we would say 4 to 6 months if they could before they get in, or they're serving in an area where they're not with kids. Um, and whether it's whether it's admitting, checking in people, stuff like that. But we kind of say 6 months. It's 6 months at least if you don't know them. If they've been in your church for 2 or 3 months and they're looking for an easy door, and you say, hey, we have a 5 to 6 month policy. Before you can come in and serve, you've only been here 2, so we'll give you a call in 4 months. And you call, and they don't go to your church anymore. I would say, I'm sorry, I know, I know your lead may not like that, your pastor may not like it, but I would say, hey, good for you, okay? Because you took a longer road. Now, I also understand that tension of volunteers and needing ratios and a growing church, and
Mhm.
it's not fun, right? Because you got other people measuring your leadership on, hey, we need this class opened, but I would say this, the churches that I've been to that do it right sometimes have to tell parents, hey, we can't take your kid today because we're all full. And when a parent hears that, they're hearing, oh man, I got to get here earlier. But they're also hearing, wow, they care about my kid. And if they were to say, hey, can y'all just open up a room? I need my kid. Say, hey, we can't because we have certain policies, and we'd actually be putting your child in jeopardy or making them vulnerable
Mhm.
because we've got to vet properly. And once the parents hear that, I think you actually win them over. Now it is inconvenient, and they don't hear the sermon that much, and the worship may not be as impactful because they're watching their 2 little kids and trying to keep them quiet. However, I think you're showing credibility as opposed to taking them in, and you kind of leave going, ooh, we are on thin ice because we're vulnerable. They just don't know it, right?
Yeah.
So.
All right. So after the interview, someone asked, "Do you have sample interview questions?" And Don, I'll email you after the fact and see if we can just get a short list of
Yeah,
those short
there's
questions.
5 or 6 questions. It's kind of asking the same thing, especially with the references. We have again, I'm in sales, right? I'm also a pastor, and I want churches. This RefLink tool here
Hmm.
that Tim was a reference. It's a text-based tool that can get to 5 to 6 references in 4 days, and it has 20 questions. Ask 5 questions, different forms that that it should this person be working with kids in 5 different ways, right? So I can give you those questions that you could put on there, and it costs about a cup of coffee. So it's not that expensive if you see that it's value, but you don't have to use it, right?
Right.
We would say with the interview, yeah, I can definitely get those questions, and we can throw 5 or 6 of those that we would say that our trainers have said. And then the thing I would say that I'm probably going to harp on more than anything now is is we call it our continuous learning home, learning hub. Actually, it's changed to the learning zone, and it's a sexual abuse prevention training, and in a way that that just does not check off that you went to training, but that it moves the heartbeat. And um, I'll just say ours is rolling out in about a week, and it's awesome. It is. It's just it is. It's a very tough topic done in a manner that is real, because it's got a sexual abuse survivor that's a national trainer, another national trainer out of Portland, and it has a student pastor that speaks at two of them, and we're getting great feedback, and it's at a cost of, for a church of 200 that would train 50 in a year, you're looking at $4. And stuff.
Mm.
So I'm not here to sell. So I'm just saying that you got to get some type of training so they understand, oh, this is what a perpetrator does. And they continue to do the same thing. Like they continue to push boundaries. They continue to build trust. They continue to isolate a child that is vulnerable, that has needs that they share with gifts, that they start to show more attention to. It alerts you to go, hey, that when you come in contact with somebody that's just a little off, and you get the hairs on the back of your neck. I think that's from God. That's, some people call it, man, that's your gut, right? Some people call it informed intuition. That's your intuition. My wife has it. I think majority of women have it. And so teaching them to follow that, along with the truths that they've been taught, um, is huge for a leader to have servants and people serving and volunteers that get it, to go, hey, we understand kids cannot be isolated, and we understand some things about grooming now, that we're just going to keep our eye open. It doesn't mean everybody's a weirdo or a creepo. Yeah, church has odd people in it, right? But there's a rhythm a perpetrator has, and they're cunning, and they're slow to maneuver, but they kind of use the same modes, um, of trying to take a couple kids or a child, build their trust and build the parents' trust, and do harm to them.
Yeah. Well, I would say, just interjecting there, for everybody that's working in the children's area, hopefully you've got some kind of rhythm of annual training, not even related necessarily to safety and security, but just training your children's staff. But this needs to be included every year. And people that have been in your ministry for years are going to say, oh, I heard this last year. It's like, yes. And it's that important that we're going to talk about it every year. Just like the next thing on Don's chart about policies, you're going to have a page in there that reminds them, here's our policies. Like he said, we're going to have two adults with every kid. We're not going to have one adult or one married couple with one kid ever. And that's our policy. And here's why. And you need to explain the why. But that gets talked about every year. And people are going to know what your agenda is when they come to your appreciation banquet and re-upping for next year, whatever that banquet is that you have. But some churches, when they have turnover in their leaders, this annual training kind of falls by the wayside for 2-3 years. And then you got all your children's workers that have forgotten what the policies are to keep your kids safe. And so if you don't have a regular rhythm of training your children's volunteer staff, you got to have it.
So here's something that I've shared with another group of churches, as we were talking about, like, just assessment. So you're over children's ministry, bring somebody in from your safety team, another adult that doesn't work in children, and for 3 weeks, give them your policies, 3 of your policies. Let's say 2 adult rule that you want them to observe, to see if anybody is in a classroom without 2 adults, if there's 1 adult. Another is, can they, during that time, view and assess if any child is isolated, walking to the bathroom with 1 adult, not 2, type deal. And just give them 3 or 4 things you want them to check, and say, would you do this for 4 hours? And just watch and see if system, because they're there to help protect, and they're just watching. You've given them, and we've helped churches do their own self-assessments to go, you've got to do this, because sometimes you can get blind because you're moving so fast on a Sunday morning that you don't realize, like, oh wow, we've kind of gotten soft there, or we've opened up a classroom and we're moving. Some great things are happening, but we actually became more vulnerable, right?
Yeah.
Um,
And I would say to our partners out there in the region, I don't know if we can drive to Iowa, even though we're glad Seth is with us tonight from Iowa. Uh, Waypoint provides a service to churches, two of them. One is a secret shopper service that we come on a Sunday morning and we keep notes of what we see, particularly with a view towards first time guests. So it has a lot to do about guest services, but also included in that, first time guests care about how you care for their kids. And so included in our report will be what we discovered as we walked around your children's area. I'm an old guy that shouldn't be in your children's department. I will walk back after the service has started and see if I get stopped in the hallway in your children's area or not. And I get stopped less often than I don't. In the churches that I go see. Another thing that we'll do is a strategic facility evaluation, which happens during the week, that we look at your facility without people and how you're physically orchestrating your building to keep people safe. And we would love to do either of those services for you. That's a very nominal fee just to pay our expenses to come and have those lenses on, those eyes on for you that you may not have because you're there every week. But someone's got to be evaluating it regularly, or else you just kind of forget, or it loses its luster of how important it is. So what else is left on your 360 solutions here? We've gotten around to quite a bit of them. Don, what's left
yeah.
for us?
So I would say with your policies, so we teach a kind of a 6-step process: background checks, references, interview, continuous learning, policies, and then enforcing them, and then time, like giving them time if you don't know them to just kind of wait. Okay. And I say that I think the time is the hardest and to follow because of the tension of your growth and needing volunteers.
Mhm.
Um, but it's one that is definitely needed. And then I would say with the children's policy, um, as you're looking at the policies you're receiving, narrowing down to 4 or 5 that are like that you can that people can remember, and maybe even putting them in a place where people see them, and constantly trying to change to reinforce. We love your kids because we always have 2 adults in the room. Whatever, however you enforce it. Um, to really keep those policies fresh, because it's easy to get, oh yeah, we got these policies, and then if you were to really go, do we know them, like and maybe 1 or 2 leaders do, but do the people actually serving, okay, do.
Yeah.
We haven't even mentioned cameras in here. They're not part of our 6 because we're talking about vetting the person. But and then I would say this. Let me go back to not the cameras, but the application. I was listening to an attorney that deals with a lot of lawsuits, and he said, "Hey, tell your churches keep the applications, like keep them forever, like keep them in the cloud. Keep that. Hey, I did. My name's Don Keehner. I interviewed Don Keehner. I have his references, and then store it and keep it, because what's happened is you're going to have some type of, if 15 years from now something comes out, or 10 years something comes out, you want to be able to validate, hey, we did everything we did, and hey, no, he wasn't here in those times. Like, yeah, he was here, but he didn't serve with us because we have this time record stamped. They're just talking about that there's no law of limitations for this, and for you to be not to do your due diligence and not be liable, you're going to need these records, okay, or some type of log that you did as much as you could to keep kids safe.
Yeah,
And it's probably not going to be you; it's going to be somebody else in 10 years.
that's right. Well, let's shift gears real quick. You mentioned it about cameras, but could you give us 2, 3 minutes about, for the average church that's running 150 people, they got a children's wing down here, multiple doors, hallway, 2 ends. What do you recommend as far as cameras go, and where's the central hub for that kept, and what's the best case scenario for your average church?
Yeah, what was that? I had one attorney that actually kind of does training. He's like, I want a camera in my room, and I want like HD to the top. When I'm teaching these kids, I want to be seen, like you. So I would say if you could get a camera, and I think it can be done at a very cost effective manner. We do not sell cameras. Okay. We have some partners that do. I checked, I was working with an organization that was doing church planning, and I'm like, hey, how expensive is it for can you get good cameras to where they could actually, portable that they could put up? And you may more know that, Tim. He's like, I think it's very affordable, that they can get stored in the cloud and turn it on for 2 hours. I'd say definitely a one in the room, of each room that you could, to get to that point. And then I would also say you've got to have something in place during the doors. I've been in more churches where once service starts, within 10 minutes, all the doors are locked to where you can only go in one door. Now that's just not, it's safety of the kids, but it's physical safety. It's safety for an intruder, an abductor. There's a lot there. And then once the service is ending, you can open those doors again. Okay. But you let the person in, you let the person. So like when you're the secret person coming into a church, that person would have to let you in and go, hey, can I help you? And you're like, just kind of walking around. Like, well, you're not allowed to walk around here. We've got kids in class and we keep them safe, type deal. And you're
Yeah.
like, oh, good deal, right? I'm sorry I stepped in there.
Yeah, Don, I saw something very recently. One of our church plants. We've got our first church plant in South Carolina that we've ever done, and I was visiting down there a couple of months ago and noticed that I don't know if you like this or not, but I liked it as a spouse of a children's minister. They had a QR code that they handed parents, particularly new parents, when their kids checked in, that gave them a link to the camera feed for their kids' classroom, and so they could see what was going on in their kids' classroom without having to physically go in the room. So I thought that was good. It keeps the parents out, so you don't have people trying to get in and out of the room, but the parents could feel like at any time I want, I can go in and look. And I thought that was brilliant. I don't know how legal it is or whatever, but I shouldn't have told which church it was. But I like that idea of giving parents access, because that creates, I think, more security of eyes on what's going on.
Oh, and accountability, right? And
Yeah.
accountability, you're telling and I would think from a parent, they're like, wow, that's nice. I wasn't expecting this. They're meeting in a school, it's a small church, but they value my child, right? That I can kind of glance on my phone or kind of glance at something and go, hey, oh, hey, Joey's doing good, right?
Yeah.
And there's three adults in the room, right?
Mhm.
And my kid's safe and having a good time. Awesome. I would think that would be a huge, huge plus.
Yeah, I
Um,
loved it. That's probably the best idea I've seen in 2021 so far. I know our second church plant that my wife and I were at, when we got out of a portable facility, got our own space, we got the cameras at Costco for next to nothing. It was a pack of 8 cameras, uh, and um, and someone paid for it. I asked, "Hey, would you pay for that?" Because they were parents that cared, and like, "Oh yeah, we'll buy it for you." But then there was the monitor that showed all 8 feeds, and a lot of churches I see that's a little monitor over in the children's area. I wanted a big monitor over on the side of the children's check-in, so that parents saw that we were monitoring the hallways and all the classrooms, kind of like that idea with this children's QR code where you could see your classes. I wanted everybody to see we had security going on. And so that monitor was up and visible, so that everybody knew that we were trying to take care of your kids. Well, we are about out of time, Don. We could talk about this. We may have to have you back, because I think we should talk maybe some more about junior and senior high. There's some other areas in church as well. But I really appreciate your input. You're really showing us from a pastor who is now in this field of the great responsibility we have for literally taking care of our flock, like a shepherd takes care of sheep. We are taking care of our flock, and the most innocent little lambs are the ones that we need to protect the most. And so I really love your ministry, and for those who are joining us on our webinar tonight, for the kids that you're trying to keep safe at your church, uh, it it's the why before the what. Is you got to understand, I've got to keep, once you get the why, all the little, you can answer all the whats. And so we're glad that you're joining us tonight. I'd like to say just a couple things about Waypoint as we are about done. Let me share my screen back to where we were right here. And I've shared some of this already. Biggest news for Waypoint is we are hosting the International Conference on Missions in November, and we want to invite everyone in the Waypoint world to come to Richmond, November 18th through 20. There's a youth conference that goes with that same time for junior, senior high. But the big news is in 3 weeks, we are doing a promotional tour, 13 stops in 4 days. And I'm going to email you this flyer for everyone that joined tonight so that you can pick the location nearest you that you can register for to come and hear all about ICOM, so that you bring a big group of people to your church. So that's the big news for Waypoint this year. Our next webinar that's coming up in a month is for your leaders in your men's ministry area. And so we've got some churches that are doing great men's ministry about which events are actually working for them versus the ones they're trying to not working. So again, we want to thank MacU for being our sponsor for our 50th episode, and hope that we see you next month or in an upcoming webinar, and that you would forward these webinars to people in your church that could really use them. So have a great night. Don, thanks for joining us, and we hope to have you on again soon.
Thanks. It's been good. Hopefully it's helpful. Thank
All
you.
right. Yeah, that's great. Thank you.